I'm Buchie, I'm an artist, and my medium is fashion. I'm from LA, born and raised. I'm, I guess, first generation because my dad came from Mexico when he was 3 or 4 years old from Guadalajara. The first thing I remember creating, I guess, is drawing. Like, I would just get these little paper notebooks, and the first thing I think was like lowrider cars. I'd buy lowrider magazines, and I'd just go draw like, 64 Impalas, and I don't know why there was always like clowns and cholos like associated whatever, so I would draw that, and I'd almost get embarrassed sometimes because I felt like it was like I don't know, like off limits, like I couldn't touch that. Like if my mom found it, she'd get mad at me for drawing like gangster stuff. But that's where I got my start, I guess, drawing, and then that turned into colored pencils and markers. And I remember getting my first Prisma marker set, and I had no idea how to use it. I never really took any like professional or paid kind of art class. It was just whatever the school did have to offer. I like fell so in love with it, and I ended up being like one of the better artists. I mean, I guess you can't really say that, but my teachers always like encouraged me to like, keep going and pushing. In high school is when I started my sneaker customization company. At first it was called Killer Kicks, just an A, no ER. And then as that grew, we had to, I guess, evolve it into something cleaner and a little bit more high-end because it was expensive. So we changed the name to Crispy Clean, which isn't that much better. And it started just painting shoes for kids in school, and then it turned into painting for, a few stores on Melrose. Then it turned into like celebrities, and by the time I was graduating, I think Usher's whole Confessions tour. We used to really go out and promote, right? Like, there was no other way to do it back then. There was no, like the internet was there, but you didn't promote on it. So we would go out and wear t-shirts with our sneakers airbrushed on them with our phone number and wearing the matching sneakers to the shirt. So people would call us, like, cause it was just so like different at the time. And one day my brother happened to go to the Beverly Center, and he was wearing a pair of the sneakers I did with the matching jersey, because throwback jerseys were in at the time. And he just happened to see Usher, and they walked past each other, and Usher like looked at his shoes and what is that? And started talking. My brother's like a crazy salesman, yapper, like can talk about anything. And by the end of it, like Usher had the shoe in his hand and gave him his number. We ended up going to the studio, and while he was recording Confessions, he brought out some pants and was like, "Can you match these?" I was, "Yeah, I guess." And it just turned into like a relationship after that. Issues after with that business, I think just demand for sneakers changed. They went from Nikes and Jordan and everything I was painting to Converse and Vans. And the price point alone on those is completely different. So people they weren't interested in high priced Vans or Converse. So it just kind of like faded away a little bit, and that was one of the problems. It wasn't sustainable to keep doing it. After high school, well, immediately after high school, a week after I graduated, I went to fashion school. And it's something I never had planned on. Even 2 months before I graduated, I had like no plan on going to fashion school. I was like, my grades were good. I had a business. I was doing like great things. So I was like, I'm gonna go to USC. And like, my dad always was like, go to college. And then somebody introduced me to FITM fashion school, and it just clicked. And I decided, and they were like, well, the semester starts in a week. And I was like, okay, I'm in. So I didn't get a summer break or anything. It was just high school to college. After graduating, I kind of floated around. Started working in like graphic design for a few companies, tried to bring the sneaker thing back, and it went for a little bit, but at that point it was too much of me having to paint on each single shoe that, I wanted to grow bigger than that. And so I just like started trying to figure it out. I called one of my old teachers from FITM, who was a pattern maker, and I asked her, like, would you help me, if I wanted to start stuff? She was like, yeah, of course. So I'd drive around on my lunch break, get stuff done, go back to work, and then the next day do it all over again. And that's how I started just making clothes. And at first it was just, it was a brand, but it was for fun. I didn't have any direction. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. But I just knew that making stuff made me happy. And it made me happier than sitting on the computer doing graphics. It's funny because most people, you hear stories when people get into fashion, they say they printed a t-shirt, right? Or they silk screen a t-shirt in their garage. I skipped that whole step. Like, I think the first piece I did was like a seersucker hoodie. So seersucker suiting, and I made it into a hoodie, and I put suede lining on the inside of the hood, and with like metal clasps on like fireman clasps on the outside, and like suede pulls. Just crazy, but I started just going like really intricate menswear, but it was still vintage inspired because a lot of the fabrics were like old kind of fabrics, like seersucker, certain kind of tartans and plaids, but just with like updated twists. And it's interesting to me now because I see some of the stuff that I'm making now is taking cues or like notes from some of the stuff I started with it. And it's like, I'm remembering why I started or like what made me happy about it, Back when I was younger, I think okay, you have to have this story, you have to have a theme, you got to tell this whole thing when you're coming up with fashion, because that's what you hear about in the stories, like it's inspired by blah, 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 blah. And so before I would like really dive in and like try to find movies and music and pictures and all this stuff that kind of like created a vibe of what I wanted to make. And I'd really like, if it was a Western thing, I'd go and make Western style jeans or whatever. But I think now it's become easier, which scared me at first because I felt maybe easy was lazy. But I think it's only easy because I've gotten better at it. I don't know if other people feel like this, but I think when you're a young designer and you're like getting into it, you tend to think like, or want to think bigger, right? And you think like, well, this blah, blah, blah person is getting inspiration from this crazy magical experience. Like I have to do the same. And you forget that sometimes the most special like things are right in front of your face. And that you take it for granted sometimes because you see it every day. So I was the same way. I was trying to look way further for inspiration and like weird kind of complex things. And I mean, it worked. It was fun. Like it told good stories, but I don't think I had the same like feeling of authenticity back then as I feel now with like the stuff I'm making. And I think it's just a learning process, and I feel fortunate that I've been able to create and learn at the same time, doing it on my own, and not having to work for like tons of other people to learn, and just being able to like make my own decisions and mistakes and, move forward. I'm still trying to figure out social media. Like I'm the generation between super techie, like kids who know like how to turn on an iPod when they're 3 years, or I said iPad when they're 3, and then like the old school people like my dad who can't even turn on a computer. So I think Instagram and social media and Twitter, all that came at a time where it was like we got it but we didn't get it. And so even when all of it started really taking off, I think the old school part of me, like the hustle, the grind, the going out and promote, like, how we did before with the shirts, I still wanted to hold on to that. So I kind of pushed it away. But I think I really realized in 2016 is like, okay, this is important. It's because I took like a little year hiatus to like kind of figure out what to do. And in that time, I saw my peers who kind of started around the same time just took off, blew up. And I would say a lot of it was because of social media and like the willingness to put themselves out there and, show people their work, while I was just kind of behind the scenes hoping that, the work would speak for itself. With social media, it's there's always something new, I feel like. But I do remember, I think it was 2017 or something, like we had posted, I don't remember, but from it we got an order from like Japan, like an online, and I was like, whoa, for that exact piece. And I was like, that's powerful, like that this little thing can show somebody on the other side of the world what you're making. They feel connected to it enough to like buy it, especially like, that the shipping cost alone on that is more than the item is worth. So that was like one of the first aha moments that I think I had with social media. You hear so much about like people doing stuff for likes and for attention. I mean, it is like a drug, and there's like, you know, the studies on it that the likes and all that is just as addictive as drugs. And I think that's when everything becomes kind of boring. Like, you know, because if everybody's going after the same thing, they're all going to start creating the same thing. And then you know, like nothing's special anymore, you know? And I think that comes with just learning, right? Like, you get tired of it after a while. Some people don't. Some people love that feeling, and that's how they get by that, just like always doing what people want. And some businesses are built off of that, right? They follow the trends and they just keep pushing because I don't think they're connected to it like their souls. You know, it's not art to them. It's a business. I think 2020 was like our best year as far as sales go, just because people were on their phones and looking at stuff every day. That got us a whole new set of eyes. Like, I was getting orders from places that I've never even heard of before. And it had to have been word of mouth, because I wasn't advertising really. We just had our social media page. And so that opened up like a crazy amount of new customers. Whether they return for other things or not, it's like at least we still got their eyes for a moment. So then when they see it again, I feel like they'll be, oh, okay, I know that brand, I remember that brand. When we started our brand, we opened it with a store, and if we'd get a write up on Complex or these little things, hype, whatever, on social media, we'd have people come in and say, I saw your stuff, I wanted to try on a jacket, whatever, right? And eventually they turn into regular customers. I see them once a week. And I think because they felt comfortable, but they also felt like a better version of themselves when they came in. Like, you'd see them straighten up and like, oh man, I look good. And like, I swear, it's happened over 50, 60 times where guys like, I wore your jacket out and I got a girl's number. I'm like, what? So I think that's always been part of the business. And I always tell people, if you look good, you feel good, then you do good. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like how they say with cooking, like you can tell when someone makes it with love. Maybe it's the same thing, the energy we put into it. But that's like, I definitely feel like people get some kind of like comfort out of whatever we do. Maybe comfort's the wrong word, but they get something. So when it comes to the brand, and this is something that it's not like set in stone, I'm still trying to get to this place. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, right? And it sounds sometimes cheesy or whatever, but I explained this to somebody and they were like, oh, okay, I get it. Sometimes like you see a very expensive room, right? And there's velvet curtains with more curtains on top and rugs and gold whatever, and it's very gaudy, and it's like, it's expensive, but that doesn't mean it's like beautiful, right? And sometimes you go into like a very just empty room with like one chair, one plant, and there's just something beautiful about it. And I think being that simple is like actually more beautiful than just throwing a bunch of things in a pot and calling it, you know, cool. The most important thing I think is like coming back to like an authentic place, which I feel like I lost for a little bit, trying to like please people and do the whole social media thing. So I am excited because it feels right now. You know, it's like before, even if stuff was going well, it just didn't feel right because I felt like I was lying. But now I'm excited because I'm doing what I want and people like it and it's growing. So I'm like, you know, it doesn't get better than that. In any business, you always have like somebody who says, you should do it this way, whatever. You never know. Nothing ever works the same for two people, especially in the creative field, right? And so I think going off the path a little bit is part of the journey. You have to do that so you could come back to a place. Because if you just tell somebody, be authentic to yourself, that almost says, don't grow. Because whatever they are at that time, they think that's them, and then you don't explore, you know. So I think you have to kind of go and mess up a little to find out like who you really are.